Hey guys, tonight we begin with why medieval peasants feared the dark more than you think. The last sliver of sun vanishes behind the distant tree line, and the world doesn't just get darker, it transforms. The familiar path to the well becomes a void. The friendly shape of the neighbor's hut dissolves into shadow. The air itself seems to thicken, growing cold and heavy with the absence of light. This isn't the gentle, managed dusk of a modern city with its streetlights and screen glow. This is an absolute swallowing darkness that feels less like an absence and more like a presence. A living thing that presses against your eyes, your skin, your very soul. Like the video, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Congratulations, you've just experienced the single most terrifying moment of the medieval day, sunset. There's no slow fade, no gradual adjustment. 1 minute you're squinting at the last of your mending in the fading light, the next you're blind. Your world, which a moment ago stretched to the edge of the field and the line of the forest, has collapsed. Its borders are now the damp, crumbling walls of your one-room hut. Outside, there is nothing. Not empty space, but active, breathing nothing. A void that your mind immediately begins to fill with every story you've ever been told, every crackle of a twig you've ever heard, every shape you've ever mistaken for something else in the corner of your eye. You fumble for the hearth, your hands knowing the way better than your eyes ever could. The embers from the day's cooking are still glowing, a tiny, desperate constellation in the overwhelming blackness. You add a few precious pieces of dry peat, some twigs, blowing gently until a feeble flame sputters to life. This isn't for cooking. This isn't for warmth. This is for sanity. This flickering orange light pushes back against the pressing dark, but only just. It creates a tiny island of the known in an ocean of the unknown. The circle of illumination reaches maybe 5 feet, just enough to see the faces of your family huddled close, their eyes wide and reflecting the firelight. Beyond that circle, the darkness is so complete it feels solid. It has weight, it has texture, it has intention. You don't fear the dark itself. You fear what it enables. You fear what it hides. In the daylight, a rustle in the bushes is a rabbit or a fox. In the dark, it's a wolf waiting to tear out your throat. A creak from the roof is the wind. In the dark, it's the weight of a demon perched above you, listening. The scuttling sound in the corner is just a mouse hunting for crumbs. In the dark, it's the skittering claws of a household spirit, a kobold or a hob, one that might be benevolent if appeased, but terribly vengeful if offended. You've spent your whole life hearing the stories, the will-o'-the-wisps that lead travelers deep into marshes to drown, the grindylow that pulls children into ponds, the black dog, a hound the size of a calf with eyes like burning coals that appears as an omen of death. In the daylight, these are just tales to tell by the fire. In the dark, they are the only logical explanation for the unexplained noise, the sudden chill, the feeling of being watched. And it's not just the supernatural. The dark enables the all-too-natural. This is the time when thieves operate, silent and invisible. When rival families might settle a grudge. When the Lord's foreman might come to collect a debt you can't pay. The darkness strips you of your one defense, sight. You can't see a threat coming. You can't recognize a friend from a foe. You are reduced to your most primal state, huddled around a fragile light, listening, always listening. Your hearing becomes painfully acute. Every snap of a twig outside is a potential threat. The hoot of an owl is a bad omen. The howl of a distant wolf is a promise of what lies beyond your fragile walls. The wind isn't just wind, it's a voice, whispering things you're not meant to hear, carrying the cries of lost souls from the churchyard. The darkness isn't empty. It is deafeningly loud with a symphony of fear, and you are the captive audience, huddled in your tiny, trembling theater of light, waiting for the final act to begin. From there, your entire existence contracts. That tiny, flickering island of firelight becomes your entire universe. The rest of the world, the path to the village well, the field you spent all day tilling, the forest where you gather kindling, might as well not exist. It has been erased, swallowed by a blackness so complete it feels like you're at the bottom of a tar-filled well, looking up at a single dancing star. This isn't a cozy campfire vibe. This is a siege. You are under constant, silent assault from the void, and your only defense is a handful of burning twigs and the collective body heat of your family. The fire isn't just light. It's a character in this nightly drama. It's a temperamental, needy god that demands constant attention. You can't let it blaze too high. Wood is precious, gathered with back-breaking labor and often stolen from the Lord's forest at great risk. But you absolutely cannot let it die. Letting the fire go out isn't just an inconvenience, it's a catastrophic failure. It's surrendering to the dark. So you tend to it with a reverence bordering on fear. You nurse the embers. You carefully select a log, not too green, not too dry, that will burn slowly and steadily through the long watch of the night. Every spark that pops and dies on the dirt floor feels like a tiny defeat. Every time the flame gutters and shrinks, your heart gutters with it. The shadows in the corners of the hut seem to lean in, waiting for their moment to pounce and extinguish your last beacon of safety. And what a pathetic beacon it is. The light from a medieval hearth is nothing like the steady, confident glow of a modern bulb. It's a living, breathing, chaotic thing. It dances and throws shifting, distorted shadows that turn a familiar hanging cloak into a lurking giant, a wooden bucket into a hunched goblin. The light is orange and weak, unable to penetrate more than a few feet. It doesn't illuminate, it suggests shapes, and then lets your fear fill in the details. The ceiling of your hut, usually just a thatched roof you pray doesn't leak, vanishes into a black ceiling of nothingness. You have no idea what's up there. Bats, spiders, something worse. Something that crawls along the rafters, watching you with unblinking eyes. You don't know, because the light from your precious, life-sustaining fire is too feeble to tell you. This is the psychological cage. You are trapped, not by walls, but by blindness. The urge to move, to stretch your legs, to check on the livestock in the corner, is stifled by a primal dread. To step outside the fire's circle is to step into the unknown. It's a voluntary plunge into the abyss. So you sit, you huddle, you make yourself small. The world, which by day was a vast expanse of labor and sky, has now shrunk to the diameter of a cartwheel. Your conversations become hushed, not out of politeness, but out of a subconscious need to not attract the attention of whatever is listening from the dark. You speak in low murmurs about mundane things, the weather, the harvest, a neighbor's ailment, but your ears are tuned to the frequency of the night outside. Every noise is analyzed, categorized, and usually filed under threat. The fire also becomes a timer, a visual countdown to the most vulnerable part of the night. As the logs burn down to embers, the circle of light shrinks. The walls of your tiny universe begin to close in. The darkness gains ground, inch by terrifying inch. You can actually watch your safety being consumed. This slow, inevitable dimming is a special kind of torture. It's a reminder that your defiance is temporary, that the dark is patient, it has all night, it has forever, and eventually, unless you are brave enough or desperate enough to risk fumbling with flint and steel in the pitch black, you will have to face it in its purest form. You will have to try to sleep while the last ember dies, surrendering completely to the very thing you've been fighting all evening. The fire doesn't just protect you from the dark, it measures the slow, steady approach of your eventual surrender to it. As the last log settles into embers and the circle of light shrinks to a soft glow on the hearthstones, your world transitions. It is no longer a place of sight, but of sound. Your eyes, useless and straining in the gloom, begin to close. But your ears, Your ears become vast, sensitive instruments, catching every vibration, every whisper, every sigh of the night. You are no longer a viewer in the dark, you are a listener. And the darkness is not silent. It is performing a symphony, and every movement is composed of fear. The first movement is the house itself. In the daylight, these were just the harmless settling noises of a wooden frame and a thatched roof. Now, they are the groans of a living entity. A beam creaks overhead, and you imagine a footstep in the loft where no one should be. The wind, which you barely noticed by day, now finger at the gaps in the daub and wattle, creating a low, mournful whistle that sounds like a distant child crying. The thatch rustles. Is it the wind, or is something moving up there, slithering through the dry straw? Every pop from the dying fire is a gunshot in the stillness, making you jump. The house you built with your own hands, the one place that should be a sanctuary, has become an instrument of terror, its every tick and groan a note in a song of paranoia. Then comes the chorus from outside. The owls begin their conversation, their hoots not wise and scholarly, but cold and declarative. They are stating a fact. The night belongs to them. A fox barks, a sharp, piercing sound that cuts through the air like a knife. Is it just a fox, or is it the cry of a shapeshifter, a skinwalker announcing its presence? Far away, but not far enough, a wolf howls. This isn't a single sound. It's a ripple of dread that passes through the walls and into your very bones. It is a reminder that you are not at the top of the food chain. Out there in the absolute black are things with teeth and hunger, and the only thing holding them back is a flimsy door of rough-hewn planks. Underneath it all is the constant rustling chorus of the unseen, the scuttling of beetles, the sniffing of hedgehogs, the countless small lives that claim the world once you've retreated behind your feeble light. They are a constant reminder that the world is teeming, busy, and alive, while you are blind and huddled in a state of paralyzed alertness. The most terrifying movement, however, is the one you can't identify, the sound with no source. The crunch of a footstep on gravel when no one is there, a faint tapping on the shutter, a low hum that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. These are the sounds that truly unravel you. Your mind, desperate for a pattern, for an explanation, latches onto the stories. That tapping isn't a branch, it's the knick-knack, a spirit demanding entry. That faint humming is the song of the fair folk, luring you away from the safety of your hearth. That unplaceable whisper is the voice of a restless dead, unable to find its way to the churchyard. In the blinding dark, folklore isn't superstition. It's the only user manual you have for the terrifying unknown. Every unexplained noise is filtered through this lens of myth and memory, and the diagnosis is always, inevitably, doom. You lie there, heart hammering against your ribs, barely breathing, trying to pass the symphony of fear, knowing that one wrong note, one sound that comes too close, could be the beginning of the end. The dark doesn't need monsters to be terrifying. It just needs your own imagination and the endless, oppressive soundtrack of the night. From the unsettling symphony of the night, your mind, desperate for answers, begins to assign shapes to the sounds and names to the shapes. The darkness isn't empty, it is populated, not just with animals, but with things older, stranger, and infinitely more cunning. This is where folklore bleeds into reality, where the stories your grandmother told you by this very fire become the only possible truth. The creeping dread you feel isn't paranoia, it's preparation. You are living in a world where the unknown has a name, a habit, and a hunger. Take the will-o'-the-wisp, for instance. That faint, flickering light you might see dancing over the marshland isn't a curiosity, it's a predator. It's a jack-o'-lantern, a dead soul or a mischievous spirit holding a ghostly flame, luring the unwary traveler off the solid path and into the sucking, drowning mud. In the daytime, you know that path. You know every stone. But in the dark, That soft, bobbing glow is the most dangerous thing imaginable. It offers false hope, false guidance, a promise of companionship in the void that leads only to a cold, silent end. You don't follow it. You bar the door tighter and whisper a prayer, because you know someone who knew someone who followed a light like that and was never seen again. Then there are the household spirits, the ones that don't live in the distant woods, but right here with you. The brownie, the kobold, the domovoy. These aren't necessarily evil, but they are terrifyingly fickle. They are the explanation for the missing spoon, the milk that sours overnight, the tool that was just there and now is gone. They are the reason you never sweep the house after dark, for you might sweep the brownie right out the door, and with him, your family's luck. They are why you leave a small bowl of cream or a crust of bread by the hearth, a peace offering to the invisible roommate who controls the whims of your daily life. A happy household spirit might help with chores, protect the livestock. An offended one, it will pinch you black and blue as you sleep, tangle your wool, sour the beer, and make the baby cry for no reason. The dark is when they are most active, and so your every action after sunset is a delicate negotiation with an unseen temperamental force. The water is especially feared. By day, the village pond is for washing, for watering animals. By night, it is the domain of the nixie, the grindilo, the jenny green teeth. These are not simple fish. They are pale, slick-skinned creatures with long, grasping fingers and seaweed hair who drag the careless, the curious, and the children into the deep. That lapping sound against the bank isn't water, it's their hands. That ripple on the moonless surface is their movement. You don't go near the water after dark, not ever. You tell your children stories of these creatures not to scare them, but to save them. The monster in the pond is a much more effective deterrent than an abstract warning about drowning. And in the deep forest, where the trees grow so thick they blot out the stars even at noon, there are older things. The leshy, the lord of the forest, who can lead a man in circles until he loses his mind. The moss folk, who look like moving, human-shaped piles of leaves and bark. These aren't creatures you fight. They are forces you avoid. They explain why a skilled hunter, a man who knows every deer trail, can become hopelessly lost just a few hundred paces into the woods at night. They explain the feeling of being watched by the ancient gnarled oak that stands at the forest's edge. The darkness transforms the familiar landscape of your daily labor into a realm of sentient, malevolent geography. Every shadowy thicket, every dark pool, every crooked tree is a potential doorway. And something is always waiting on the other side, listening, watching, and waiting for the dark to grant it permission to cross over. The fear isn't of the dark itself, but of the specific named inhabitants you truly believe are sharing it with you. From the whispered names of folk spirits and forest creatures, your mind seeks a higher authority, a sturdier bulwark against the creeping dread. You turn to the church, but here, in the suffocating dark, the line between salvation and damnation isn't just thin, it's invisible. The church doesn't just offer comfort, it provides a detailed, terrifying map of the very horrors you're trying to escape, confirming that your fears are not only real, but cosmically sanctioned. The village priest speaks of God's love, yes, but he spends far more time describing the devil's malice, and the devil isn't an abstract concept. He is a physical presence, a prowling predator. He is the prince of darkness for a reason. The night is his kingdom, his hunting ground. Every shadow could be his cloak. Every sudden chill in the air, even by the fire, could be his breath on the back of your neck. He is a shapeshifter, a deceiver. That black dog you saw at the edge of the field at dusk, that could be him. The handsome stranger who offered you a bargain in a dream. That was him. The voice that whispers your darkest, most secret thoughts when you're trying to pray. That is him, always him. The church gives the ultimate name to the formless evil you feel in the dark, and in doing so makes it infinitely more personal and inescapable. And he doesn't work alone. The darkness teems with his servants, demons. These aren't the mischievous, temperamental household spirits you can placate with a bowl of cream. These are pure, intelligent hatred given form. They are fallen angels, armed with a knowledge of human weakness that spans centuries. They specialize in temptation, in despair, in possession. The church teaches that sleep is a vulnerable state, a time when your soul's defenses are down. A nightmare isn't just a bad dream, it's a demonic assault, a trial sent to test your faith, or a direct attack to lead you into sin. That feeling of a heavy weight on your chest as you drift off, making it hard to breathe, that's not sleep paralysis. That's the incubus, a demon sitting on you, stealing your breath, filling your mind with foul and sinful thoughts. The church has a name for it, a ritual against it, but in the moment, in the blind black, all you have is the terror and the certainty that a very real, very malicious intelligence is trying to claim your immortal soul. Then there is the afterlife itself. The promise of heaven is a distant, shimmering hope, but the threat of hell is immediate and visceral. The priest describes it in glorious, gruesome detail every Sunday. Rivers of boiling blood, lakes of fire, flesh eternally rended and restored only to be rended again. The screams of the damned are not metaphorical. They are a constant chorus, just on the other side of a thin, spiritual veil. And the darkness of night feels like a tiny taste of that ultimate darkness, the one without even a flicker of God's light. When the world is pitch black, it's not a stretch to imagine this is what hell feels like. Not the fire yet, but the absolute, utter separation from all light, all hope, all love. The silence of the night isn't peaceful. It's the silence of God turning his back. So you pray. You clutch the crude wooden cross your father carved. You whisper the paternoster until the words lose all meaning and become just a rhythmic shield against the silence. But even prayer is a double-edged sword. What if you pray wrong? What if you have an unconfessed sin? What if God isn't listening tonight? The church offers the tools for protection, but it also places the burden of that protection squarely on your own, trembling shoulders. Your faith must be a fortress, but in the deep, lonely watch of the night, with demons at the walls and the devil in the wind, it can feel like a house of straw. The church confirms the war is real, but leaves you, a blind peasant in a dark hut, to fight it alone until dawn. As the embers fade to a dull, pulsating red, and the cold of the night begins to win its war against the fire's dying breath, the final, most dreaded ritual begins. It's time to bed down. This isn't the cozy, comfortable retreat we imagine. This is the act of surrendering your mobility, your ability to flee, and entrusting your safety to the dubious protection of a blanket and the fragile lock on a door you already know is worthless. Going to bed in the Dark Ages wasn't about rest. It was about becoming a stationary target. The bed itself is an apology for comfort. It's a wooden frame, if you're lucky, stuffed with straw that has been crushed by generations of tired bodies. It crackles with every slight movement, a noisy announcement of your presence to anything that might be listening. The straw is damp at the bottom from the cold earth floor it sits upon, and it pokes through the rough sacking, 1,000 tiny needles against your skin. There are no pillows, just a rolled-up cloak or a log of wood. You lie down not to relax, but to assume a position of maximum defensiveness. You curl onto your side, facing the door, knees drawn up. It's a fetal position, a primal posture of protection. The rough wool blanket you pull over yourself is heavy, not with warmth, but with accumulated grime and dampness. It smells of wood smoke, old sweat, and a faint unsettling sweetness of mildew. It doesn't comfort you. It weighs you down, a soggy, scratchy shroud. And then comes the sharing, There is no concept of personal space. Your entire family, parents, children, perhaps a grandparent or a visiting cousin, piles into this crunchy, poky nest. You are a tangle of limbs and shared body heat. At first, the closeness is a relief, a source of warmth, a living barrier. You can feel the rise and fall of your child's chest against your back, the solid presence of your spouse beside you. But as the night deepens, this intimacy curdles into claustrophobia. A cough from your brother sends a jolt of panic through the whole pile. A sudden twitch from a dreamer feels like an attack. The sound of someone else's breathing, too slow or too quick, becomes a source of anxiety. Are they asleep? Are they awake and listening like you? Or is that the even, measured breath of something that has taken their place in the dark? The very people you love become unknown quantities in the blindness, their familiar sounds distorted by fear. This is when the sounds of the house and the world outside seem to grow louder, more intentional. With your body immobilized, your hearing becomes hyperacute. Every rustle in the straw beneath you could be a flea, or it could be something else burrowing up from the earth. The scuttling in the roof is no longer abstract, it's directly overhead. The wind's moan has a new vocabulary, and it seems to be forming words just below the threshold of understanding. You lie perfectly still, muscles tensed, playing a game of dead. If you don't move, perhaps it won't see you. Perhaps the thing in the corner, the thing you can feel watching, will pass you by. Your bladder aches, but the thought of untangling yourself from the human knot, of stepping onto the cold floor and fumbling towards the bucket in the pitch black, is a greater terror than the discomfort. So you hold it, adding a new urgent misery to the symphony of fear. The blanket, which was meant to be a shield, becomes a trap. It muffles your hearing, making the outside world more mysterious. Its weight makes it hard to breathe, and every time you adjust it, the straw beneath you screams your location to the night. Sleep is not a gentle escape. It's a dangerous lapse in vigilance, a temporary death you are forced to risk every single night. You fight it, your eyes wide open, staring into the same blackness they see when closed, until exhaustion, finally, mercifully, drags you down into a fitful sleep, filled with dreams of being chased, of being buried, of being found. The weight of the blanket is the weight of your own vulnerability, and in the medieval night, it was heavier than stone. From the suffocating weight of the blanket and the tense stillness of pretended sleep, a new, more intimate horror awaits. It doesn't come from outside the walls or from the folklore of your village. It comes from within your own mind, from the treacherous borderland between waking and sleeping. This is the realm of nightmares while awake, a state where your body betrays you, your senses lie, and the dark reveals that its most potent weapon is your own consciousness. It begins subtly. You're lying there, watching the last ember die, your muscles aching from tension. The line between your closed eyes and the black room vanishes. You're floating in a void. Then the sounds change. The wind's moan coalesces into a whisper that seems to come from right beside your ear. You can't make out words, but you can feel intention, a malevolent, hissing intention. You try to turn your head to see, but you can't move. A leaden weight seems to press down on your entire body, pinning you to the crackling straw. This isn't the comforting weight of the blanket. This is a paralysis, a supernatural bondage. You are awake. You're sure you're awake, but your body is still asleep, refusing the commands of your panic-stricken mind. This is the old hag, the nightmare, sitting on your chest. Your breathing becomes shallow, frantic. You try to scream to alert your sleeping family inches away, but only a faint, strangled gasp escapes your lips. It's lost in the chorus of snores and rustles. You are utterly, terrifyingly alone in your panic. This is when the shadows in the room, which were just formless black, begin to move. They peel themselves away from the walls and congeal at the foot of the bed. They don't have distinct shapes, but they have presence. They are watching you. They are drinking your fear. You can feel their cold attention like a physical touch. This isn't a dream. The rough straw digging into your cheek, the cold air on your face, the ache in your bladder, they're all too real. The horror is that the waking world and the nightmare world have fused into one unbearable reality. In the daylight, the village wise woman might call it a hag riding and suggest charms. The priest would call it a demonic oppression, an incubus. But in the moment, labels don't matter. All that matters is the crushing certainty that you are under attack by an invisible force that has rendered you a prisoner in your own body. Time distorts. The experience feels like it lasts for hours, a drawn-out torture where you fight with every fiber of your will to twitch a finger, to make a sound, to break the spell. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone, and you're certain it's about to burst. Then, as suddenly as it began, it breaks. A log in the fire collapses with a soft crunch of ash. Your spouse shifts beside you, muttering in their sleep. The spell is broken. You gasp a full deep breath, your body flooding with relief so profound it leaves you trembling. You can move. The shadows are just shadows again, but the terror does not dissipate. It lingers, a toxic residue in your mind, because you can't be sure. Were you dreaming, or were you truly visited by something? The line is gone, erased. The experience felt more real than the ground beneath your feet. The dark has shown you that the safest place, your own mind, is not safe at all. It's a gate that can be forced open from the inside, and the things that walk through look exactly like your deepest, most primal fears. Sleep is no longer a refuge, but a battlefield you must cross every night, never knowing if you'll make it to morning with your soul intact. From the private terror of sleep paralysis and the cramped vulnerability of your bed, there comes a sound, a distant, rhythmic tapping that should be comforting. It's the night watchman making his rounds. The village has not entirely abandoned you to the dark. There are rules, there is order, there is a man with a lantern and a staff walking the muddy paths between huts. This should be reassuring. But in the consuming blackness, the watchman's presence doesn't calm you. It highlights just how vast the darkness is and how terribly small his light must be. You hear him long before you see any glow from his lamp. The tap-tap-tapping of his staff on the frozen ground, the occasional cough, the faint crunch of his footsteps. He calls out the hour, his voice thin and strained, swallowed by the night almost before it reaches your walls. 2 of the clock, and all is well, he cries. But you know it's a lie, or at best, a hope. All is not well. You are lying in bed, your heart still pounding from a waking nightmare, convinced something was just sitting on your chest. How would he know? How could he possibly know what happens behind these closed doors, in the silent spaces between his footsteps? His lantern is a joke against the enormity of the dark. You might catch a sliver of its weak orange light as it passes the crack under your door, a fleeting stripe of false promise that vanishes in an instant. It doesn't push back the shadows, it just reminds you that they return the moment the light moves on. The watchman himself is likely old, frail, or someone deemed unfit for proper labor. He is armed with a wooden staff, maybe a knife. What could he do against a pack of wolves, against a determined thief, against the things that don't have physical form? He is a symbol, a performance of security for a community that knows, deep down, it is fundamentally on its own once the sun goes down. And then the sounds of his passage fade. The tapping grows softer, the footsteps recede. The silence that rushes back in is somehow deeper, more profound, and more terrifying than before. His visit was a temporary interruption, a brief commercial break in the night's main programming of dread. Now you are alone again. You find yourself listening not just for threats, but for the return of his footsteps, for the next scheduled announcement that all is well. You are timing the void. How long until he comes back? 10 minutes, 30, an hour. In the featureless stretch of the night, you have no way to measure it. The gap between his rounds is an eternity, a canvas of time on which your fear can paint its worst masterpieces. Worse still, his presence introduces a new fear, the fear of being the exception. What if something happens in the moments after he passes? What if the threat is clever enough to wait for the tap-tap-tapping to fade before it makes its move? The watchman creates a pattern, and anything intelligent enough to be a real threat would know to work around that pattern. You start to wonder if his rounds are actually making you less safe, marking a predictable schedule for when the village is most vulnerable. He is a bell that rings to announce the all clear, but in the dead of night, that bell might as well be a dinner bell for the things that hide in the dark. So you lie there, caught in a cruel paradox. You listen for the watchman, desperate for that thin human sound in the inhuman silence. But when he comes, his presence is so pitifully inadequate that it only amplifies your sense of exposure. And when he leaves, the silence he leaves behind is somehow heavier, more charged with menace. The community has tried. It has appointed a sentinel. But the night is too big, too old, and too hungry for one old man with a tapping stick and a guttering flame. The watch doesn't see the things that move in the dark. It only sees the path it has walked 1,000 times before. And in its blind, ritualistic journey, it reminds you that you are truly, utterly, and hopelessly on your own. As the watchman's footsteps fade into the distance, a different kind of fear settles in, one that has nothing to do with demons or folk spirits. This fear is colder, more calculating. It's the fear of your neighbor. The darkness isn't just a cloak for monsters. It's the perfect disguise for desperate men. While you lie paralyzed by supernatural dread, there are those who move through the same blackness with clear, pragmatic purpose to take what is yours. The threats are mundane but devastating. The axe head you spent months saving for, left leaning against the outside wall. The chicken that roosts in the lean-to, a precious source of eggs and occasional meat. The sack of grain you've been carefully rationing to get through the winter. These aren't just objects, they are the fragile building blocks of your survival. In a world where one bad harvest means starvation, the loss of a single tool or animal can be a death sentence stretched over months. The dark enables this slow-motion violence. A thief doesn't need to confront you. He simply needs to be quiet, to be patient, to move through the village like a ghost while its inhabitants are trapped in their huts, blinded by fear and night. You know it happens. You've heard the stories. Old Man Hemming woke to find his best fishing net gone. The miller's daughter found footprints in the mud by their grain store. There are no police to call, no investigation to launch. The loss is simply absorbed, a quiet tragedy that makes an already hard life harder. The thief is likely someone you know, a neighbor whose own harvest failed, a father with too many mouths to feed, a man broken by debt or ail. This knowledge doesn't create sympathy. It creates a low-grade paranoia that poisons the community. You look at the man you share a field with and wonder if it was his shadow you saw moving past your shutter last night. The dark doesn't just hide strangers. It reveals the desperation in those you thought you knew. Then there is the greater, more dangerous temptation, poaching. The forest that borders the village doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Lord. The deer, the boar, the rabbits, they are his property. To take one is not just theft, it is a crime against the Lord himself, punishable by mutilation or hanging. But a man with starving children sees no other choice, so he takes his snare or his bow and vanishes into the absolute black beneath the trees. You might hear the distant snap of a twig, the faint rustle of his passage. You say nothing, you see nothing. To report him is to condemn a man to death for trying to feed his family. To aid him is to risk sharing his fate. This creates an unspoken tension that hangs over the village after dark. Everyone knows it happens. Everyone stays silent. The darkness becomes a collective secret, a blanket of complicity. But it also means that any sound you hear outside could be a thief targeting you. or a poacher who might be seen, bringing the Lord's men down on the whole village. The crunch of a footstep isn't just a threat to your property. It's a threat to the delicate, silent balance of a community living on the edge. You lie in bed listening, wondering if the noise is a spirit, a wolf, or something far more complicated. A man, just like you, whose desperation has become your problem. The greatest fear isn't even the loss itself, it's the helplessness. If you hear someone outside, what can you do? Burst out of your hut with a farming tool to confront a shadow? You might be stabbed. You might start a blood feud. Or you might find nothing at all, having exposed yourself and your family to the cold and the dark for no reason. So you stay put. You listen. You pray they take the chicken and not the axe. You bargain with the darkness, offering it a smaller sacrifice in the hope it will leave the rest. The criminal cover of night proves that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the dark isn't what isn't human, but what is. It reveals the fragile illusion of community, showing that when survival is on the line, the darkness can make strangers of us all. As the nights stretch into weeks, and the weeks into the long, dark tunnel of winter, something subtle but terrifying begins to happen. The fear stops being about specific threats, the demon, the thief, the wolf, and becomes something far more insidious. It becomes the background radiation of your existence. The darkness is no longer just outside your door. It has moved inside your mind, and it's slowly, methodically, dismantling your sanity from within. The first thing to go is your sense of time. In the endless, featureless black, minutes stretch into what feel like hours. You try to measure the night by the watchman's rounds, by the changing sounds of the animals, by the gradual cooling of the hearthstones. But your perception becomes distorted. The gap between the watchman's second and third round feels twice as long as between the first and second. Has he fallen asleep? Has something happened to him? Or is your mind playing tricks, stretching and compressing time like a piece of damp leather? You lose track of whether you've been lying awake for an hour or 5. The night becomes an eternity. A black ocean with no shore in sight, and you are adrift in it, losing all bearing. Then comes the paranoia, not about others, but about yourself. The isolation and sensory deprivation of the dark become a breeding ground for doubts that would never survive in the daylight. That strange thought you had yesterday about the miller's wife, was that your own thinking? Or was it a demon putting ideas in your head? The sudden unbidden memory of a childhood mistake, why is it haunting you now with such vivid clarity? The darkness strips away the distractions of daily labor, leaving you alone with your most shameful secrets, your deepest insecurities. You begin to wonder if you're going mad. Is everyone else this afraid? Do they all lie awake, listening to the blood pulse in their ears, convinced it's the footsteps of something approaching? Or are you uniquely broken, uniquely vulnerable to the night's psychological warfare? Your dreams and waking life begin to blur together. After nights of fractured sleep and waking nightmares, you start to question what's real. Did you actually see a face at the shutter last night? Or was it a dream? Did you hear your name whispered from the corner? Or was it the wind? The lack of reliable light means you can never verify, never prove to yourself that it was nothing. Each unverifiable experience becomes another crack in the foundation of your reality. You find yourself speaking less during the day, conserving your energy for the nightly vigil. You jump at sudden noises even in broad daylight. The constant low-grade terror of the night begins to leach the color and joy from your days, leaving you a hollowed-out version of yourself going through the motions of survival, while your true self is consumed by the exhausting business of waiting for darkness to fall again. The most terrifying realization eventually dawns. The darkness isn't creating monsters. It's revealing the monster that was always inside you. The capacity for bottomless fear, for irrational suspicion, for a despair so profound it feels like a physical weight. The things you fear in the night are just projections of this internal vulnerability. The demon is your own guilt. The thief is your anxiety about scarcity. The wolf is your primal fear of death. The dark is merely the blank screen on which your mind projects its deepest terrors. And the truly horrifying part is that you can't escape it. You can bar the door against men and animals, but you cannot bar the door of your own mind. You are trapped in there with it, night after endless night, watching as the person you thought you were slowly unravels in the endless, silent, starless dark. From the deep psychological erosion of the adult mind, we turn to a different kind of terror, one that is simpler, more immediate, and somehow more profound. In the crushing darkness of the medieval night, a child's experience was not merely a smaller version of an adult's fear. It was a world where imagination wasn't a tool for escape, but a factory for manufacturing monsters, where every shadow was a giant, and every lesson about survival was taught through stories that would haunt you until dawn. For a child, the darkness began not at sunset, but earlier. As the light faded, your world didn't just get darker, it got smaller. The corners of the one-room hut, familiar by day, became bottomless pits. The hanging herbs by the hearth became skeletal hands waiting to grab you. You were shorter, closer to the floor where things scuttled and whispered. The grown-ups' conversations became hushed, their faces drawn and serious in the firelight, and their anxiety was a scent you could smell, a vibration you could feel through the packed earth floor. You didn't understand the economics of theft or the theology of demons, but you understood the language of fear, and the entire household was screaming it in silence. The stories you were told weren't for entertainment. They were warnings, sharpened into weapons to keep you safe. Don't wander near the water after dark, or Jenny Green Teeth will pull you under. Don't stray into the woods, or the leshy will lead you so deep you'll never find your way back. Don't complain about your supper, or the boggart will sour the milk and pinch you black and blue while you sleep. These weren't abstract concepts. They were as real as the hunger in your belly. The stories gave faces and names to the formless dread, and in doing so, made the darkness even more populated, more personal. That gurgle from the drainage ditch wasn't water, it was Jenny clearing her throat. That rustle in the thatch wasn't a mouse, it was the boggart getting ready for his nightly rounds. Bedtime was the worst part of the day. You were tucked into the communal straw mattress, a small body among larger ones, but you felt utterly alone. The adults might eventually succumb to exhaustion, but you would lie awake for what felt like forever, your eyes wide, staring into a blackness so complete it felt like you'd gone blind. Every noise was amplified. Your father's snore was a bear's growl. Your mother's shifting position was a monster stirring. The scuttling in the roof was a whole army of things with too many legs, marching directly over your head. You'd pull the rough wool blanket over your head, creating a tiny, stuffy tent of safety, but then you'd be trapped with the sound of your own heartbeat and the terrifying possibility that something might be under the blanket with you. The worst was when you needed to relieve yourself. The chamber pot was across the room, a journey of maybe 10 feet that felt like crossing a continent. To make that trip, you had to leave the safety of the bed, step onto the cold, alive-feeling floor, and traverse the unknown territory of the dark hut. You'd lie there, squeezing your eyes shut, trying to ignore the growing pressure in your bladder, bargaining with yourself, until the physical discomfort finally overcame the terror. You'd make a desperate, fumbling dash, your heart pounding, certain that cold, grasping fingers were inches from your ankles. The sigh of relief when you made it back to the straw mattress was the purest emotion you'd feel all night. And through it all, you learned the most important lesson of medieval childhood. The world is a terrifying place, and the dark is when it shows its true face. This wasn't a fear you would outgrow, it was a truth you would internalize, a fundamental layer of your understanding of the universe. The child who trembled under the blanket would become the adult who stared wide-eyed into the same darkness. their imagination now tempered by the grim realities of survival, but never truly freed from the monsters that first took root in their youngest, darkest hours. From the primal terror of a child's imagination, we turn to what should have been the great savior of the medieval night: artificial light. But in an age before electricity, the solutions available were pathetic, expensive, and often more terrifying than the darkness they sought to push back. The candle wasn't a beacon of hope, it was a flickering, expensive tease that showed you just enough to see the shadows moving. First, let's be clear about what a candle meant to a peasant. It wasn't the sturdy, evenly burning pillar of wax you're imagining. Those were for churches and nobles. Your candle was a rushlight, a pathetic, smouldering thing made by soaking the pithy core of a rush plant in leftover animal fat. It sputtered, it smoked, it stank of burning fat and created more soot than light. Holding one felt less like holding illumination and more like holding a dying thing that coughed black smoke into your face as it expired. Its light was weak and orange, throwing out maybe 3 feet of usable visibility before surrendering to the dark. It was a sun that had forgotten how to shine. And the cost? Even these miserable rushlights were a luxury. The fat used to make them was cooking fat, precious and needed for food. Every minute you burned a rushlight was a minute of nourishment going up in smoke. You didn't light one because you were afraid of the dark. You lit one for a specific urgent task: to find a crying baby, to tend to a sick elder, to check on a strange noise that simply couldn't be ignored. You wouldn't dream of burning one just to read or to relax. The very act of lighting one was an admission that something was terribly wrong, adding a layer of financial anxiety to whatever fear had prompted you to strike the flame. Then there was the way this feeble light actually played with your perception. A single candle or rushlight doesn't illuminate a room. It creates a tiny, shifting island of visibility in a sea of black. And because the light source moves, flickering with every draft, waving in your trembling hand, the shadows it casts also move. That cloak on the hook isn't just a still shape anymore, it's a swaying giant. The stool in the corner seems to shift and dance. The weak, uneven light actually animates the darkness, giving life and movement to the ordinary objects in your hut. Your eyes, desperate for pattern, try to make sense of the dancing shadows, and they invariably settle on the worst possible interpretation. The light promised clarity, but it delivers confusion and heightened fear. If you were slightly wealthier and could afford a tallow candle made from animal fat, you faced other problems. Tallow candles gutter and need constant snuffing, trimming the wick, or they produce a towering, dangerous flame and even more smoke. The smell is rancid like burning meat, and they attract every flying insect in the vicinity, creating a buzzing, fluttering halo of distraction around your already pathetic light source. You find yourself watching the moth flying into the flame instead of watching the darkness, a tiny tragedy playing out that mirrors your own futile battle against the night. So you learn to hoard your light. You learn to move through the dark by memory and touch, saving your precious rushlights for true emergencies. The false dawn of candles is the cruelest trick of all. It offers a solution that is too expensive, too weak, and too unreliable to actually solve the problem. It shows you that even when you try to fight back, the darkness is stronger, more persistent, and more absolute than your best efforts. The candle doesn't conquer the night. It merely holds a tiny, expensive, and temporary meeting with it, a negotiation where the darkness always holds the better cards. You blow out the flame, and the sudden return to blackness feels like a physical blow, because for a few short minutes you had dared to hope you could see. And hope, in the medieval night, was the most dangerous luxury of all. From the false comfort of feeble candlelight, we come to the true test of the medieval spirit: winter. The fear of darkness wasn't constant throughout the year. Summer nights were brief affairs. hurried interruptions between long hours of sunlit labor. But winter was different. Winter wasn't a series of nights. It was one long, unbroken night, with occasional grey interruptions. This was when the darkness stopped being an event and became your entire existence. A siege that tested the limits of human endurance, not just physically, but spiritually. The difference began at both ends of the day. In summer, dusk was a gradual letting go. The sun took its time, painting the sky in farewell colors of orange and purple, giving you hours to prepare, to finish chores, to mentally brace yourself. In winter, the sun didn't set. It surrendered. It dropped below the horizon like a stone into a pond, and the blackness rushed in with shocking speed. There was no transition, only a sudden, violent shift from gloomy twilight to absolute nothingness. Mornings were no better. You woke in the same black you fell asleep in, and the weak, grey light that eventually appeared felt less like a new day and more like a temporary, half-hearted truce. The cold was the darkness's ruthless ally. In summer, the night air could be a relief, a cool blanket after a day of sweaty labor. In winter, the cold was a predator in its own right. It seeped through the walls. It stole the warmth from your hearth. It made the straw in your mattress feel like frozen needles. You huddled closer together, not just for comfort, but for survival. The cold made every sound sharper, every crack of a freezing tree branch like a gunshot in the stillness. It made your muscles stiff and your joints ache, adding a layer of physical misery to the psychological terror. The darkness was bad enough, but the combination of dark and cold created a synergy of suffering that was far greater than the sum of its parts. Time itself became distorted in the winter dark. With only a few hours of feeble daylight, your entire sense of rhythm collapsed. Was it midnight or just past supper? You had no way of knowing. The watchman's calls seemed to come at random intervals, his voice thinner, more defeated in the freezing air. The endless stretch of darkness felt like a punishment, a cosmic sentence you had to serve simply for being alive. You'd sleep not because you were tired, but because there was nothing else to do. No way to work, no way to see, no way to live. You'd wake up hours later, disoriented to the same blackness, unsure if you'd slept for an hour or a day. The winter night was a thief of time, leaving you adrift in a featureless black ocean with no stars to navigate by. This prolonged exposure changed the nature of the fear itself. The sharp, immediate terror of a sound in the night became a dull, chronic ache of dread. The monsters of folklore didn't just visit, they moved in. The feeling of being watched wasn't a momentary chill, it was a constant state of being. Your resilience wore down, sanded away by the endless grinding hours of darkness. Hope became a distant memory. Spring felt like a myth told to children. You lived in the eternal now of winter, a now that was cold, black and silent, and the sheer duration of it threatened to break something fundamental inside you. The summer night was a battle you could win by surviving until dawn. The winter night was a war of attrition, and the darkness had all the reinforcements. It was the season of longest dark, and for the medieval peasant, it was the closest thing to hell on earth. From the endless siege of winter darkness comes the moment every peasant family dreaded most, the sound of illness in the night. A child's cough that sounds too deep, a spouse's feverish tossing that feels too hot to the touch, an elder's labored breathing that seems to be slowing. In the daylight, sickness was manageable. Herbs could be gathered, the wise woman could be consulted, the priest could be summoned. But in the dark, illness transformed from a challenge to a terrifying, helpless vigil where you were the only doctor, and your tools were prayer, desperation, and a complete inability to see what was happening. The first sign was usually sound, a cough that broke the rhythm of the night, a moan that was different from the usual sleep sounds. In the absolute blackness, your hearing became your only diagnostic tool. You'd lean close, your ear inches from the sick person's face, listening to the quality of their breathing. Was it rattling? Was it shallow? Every gasp, every wheeze was analyzed and interpreted in the most dire terms. That cough wasn't just a cough. It was the death rattle beginning. That fever wasn't just a fever. It was a fire burning them up from the inside, and you were blind to its progress. Then came the helpless fumbling. You'd light one of your precious, pathetic rushlights, knowing it was a finite resource you couldn't replenish until morning. In its weak, dancing light, you'd try to assess the situation. But what could you see? A flushed face, pale skin. You couldn't tell in the orange glow. You'd place a hand on a forehead, but your own hands were cold from the night air, making every temperature feel like a fever. You'd offer water, fumbling in the dark to find the ladle, spilling as much as you delivered. Every simple action became a complex, clumsy ordeal, and each fumble felt like a failure, like you were making things worse. This was when the darkness became truly suffocating. You knew that just beyond your door in the village, there was help. The wise woman had herbs that could break a fever. The priest could deliver last rites, but they might as well have been on the moon. To venture out into the blackness was to risk your own life, to get lost, to fall, to attract wolves or worse. To send someone else was to ask them to take that risk. So you made the calculation, the terrible arithmetic of the medieval night. Was this illness bad enough to warrant potentially sacrificing another life? Usually the answer was no. You would wait and watch and pray, trapped in the horrible limbo of knowing help existed but was utterly inaccessible. The worst was the progression. In the darkness, without any visual cues, illness seemed to move faster, more mysteriously. A person who seemed merely warm at midnight could be burning up and delirious by the time the first hint of grey touched the sky. The darkness didn't just hide the symptoms, it seemed to accelerate them. You'd listen to the breathing change, the coughs deepen, the moans become more frequent, and you were powerless to do anything but bear witness to this invisible, advancing enemy. Your mind would race through every story you'd ever heard of sudden plagues, of wasting sicknesses, of children who went to sleep with a cough and never woke up. The darkness magnified every symptom, turning a common cold into a potential death sentence. And through it all, you performed the only rituals you could. You whispered prayers until your voice was hoarse. You placed a cool cloth on a forehead you couldn't properly see. You held a hand, squeezing it, trying to transmit some of your own strength, your own will to live through that touch. You became an anchor in the black, stormy sea of the night, holding on to someone who was drifting away, with no lighthouse to guide you and no dawn in sight. When someone fell ill in the medieval night, the darkness didn't just hide the world, it hid the very process of dying, making you a helpless witness to a tragedy playing out just beyond the reach of your senses, in a room you knew intimately but could no longer see. From the helpless vigil of sickness, we come to another fundamental terror of the medieval night: movement. The path you know by day, the simple route from your hut to the well, to your neighbor's door, to the edge of the field, becomes, in the dark, an impossible journey. What was familiar becomes foreign. What was safe becomes treacherous. And the simple act of moving from point A to point B becomes a life or death expedition into the unknown. In daylight, you know this path with your body more than your mind. You know where the tree root crosses the track, where the ground dips after rain, where the thorny bush reaches out to snag your sleeve. You've walked it 1,000 times, but in the absolute black of a moonless night, that muscle memory abandons you. Your feet, so sure by day, become clumsy, hesitant things. You shuffle rather than step, your toes probing ahead for obstacles, your arms outstretched like a blind man's. The mental map you carry in your head, so clear in the light, smudges and dissolves in the ink of night. That familiar oak tree you use as a landmark is just a deeper black against a black background. The path itself vanishes, indistinguishable from the surrounding field after just a few paces. This is when disorientation sets in, a primal fear deeper than any monster, After just 20 steps from your door, you can no longer see the faint glow of your hearth. You are untethered from the only safety you know. You stop, turning slowly, and realize with a sickening lurch that you have no idea which way you're facing. Was your hut behind you? To the left? The world has become a uniform sphere of blackness, and you are at its center, completely lost. The urge to panic is a physical pressure in your chest. To be lost 10 yards from your own home is a special kind of terror. It proves that the darkness hasn't just changed the world, it has stolen it from you. Then come the hazards. The ditch you easily step over by day becomes a broken ankle waiting to happen. The low-hanging branch you automatically duck under becomes a claw that whips across your face, startling you and drawing blood. The ground underfoot, firm and known by day, is now a mystery. Is that solid earth or a patch of mud that will suck the shoe from your foot? Every step is a gamble, a trust fall into the void. Your hearing strains not just for threats, but for clues. The sound of the stream should be to your left, but is it getting louder? Have you wandered toward it, or is the wind playing tricks? The world is speaking a language of sounds you can no longer translate without the context of sight. This is why stories of people dying just feet from their own homes weren't rare tragedies. They were cautionary tales told to enforce the most important rule of the medieval night: stay put. The cold wasn't the only killer. A twisted ankle could leave you stranded until morning, by which time hypothermia would have claimed you. A fall into a ditch could knock you unconscious, and you'd drown in 3 inches of water. The darkness didn't need monsters to kill, it just needed to take away your ability to navigate the world you thought you knew. Every journey, no matter how short, was a potential suicide mission, so you learned to stay. You learned to endure the full bladder, the thirst, the anxiety, the sounds. Because the greatest terror isn't what might be out there in the dark. It's the realization that the world you've built your entire life upon, the paths you've worn smooth with your daily passage, the landscape you call home, becomes an actively hostile and unrecognizable terrain the moment the sun vanishes. The path you know by day is a lie, and the night is the truth. A truth that says you are a stranger in your own life, blind, vulnerable, and one wrong step away from vanishing forever. From the terrifying disorientation of the familiar path, we turn to the human response, the fight back. When the darkness felt like an active, malevolent force, you didn't just endure it. You fought it with every tool you had. These weren't the grand rituals of the church, but the quiet, desperate folk magic passed down through generations. A patchwork of prayers, charms, and actions designed to build a fragile fortress of safety around your family and your home when the void pressed in. The rituals began at the threshold. As the last light faded, you'd take a piece of cold, hard iron, a horseshoe if you were lucky, a simple nail if you were not, and you'd touch it to the door frame, then to the windowsill. Iron was old magic, older than the church. It was believed to be pure, uncorruptible, a substance that spirits and witches could not abide. This wasn't a symbol, it was a physical barrier, a way of saying, "You shall not pass," in a language the dark understood. You do the same with salt, a precious commodity, sprinkling a thin, barely affordable line across the doorway. Salt purified, it preserved, and in the logic of folk magic, it could preserve your home from the decay and corruption that the night represented. Inside, the hearth became an altar. Before banking the fire for the night, you might toss in a specific herb, a sprig of rowan for protection, some St. John's wort to ward off melancholy spirits. The crackle and scent of the burning plant was an offering, a fragrant prayer sent up with the smoke. You'd arrange the cooking utensils in a specific way, the knife blade pointing outward, the pot handle turned to the wall. Small, seemingly meaningless actions that were laden with intention. To an outsider, it would look like tidying up. To you, it was setting a trap, creating a pattern of order that chaotic evil forces would find difficult to penetrate. Then came the spoken words. As the family huddled together, you'd recite the prayers the priest taught you, but you'd also whisper the older charms, the ones your grandmother taught you, that mixed Latin phrases with forgotten pre-Christian words. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night, good Lord deliver us. The words themselves were a shield. The act of speaking them into the silence was a defiance. You were naming the terrors, and in naming them, you were asserting a tiny measure of control. You'd make the sign of the cross not just over yourself, but over your children, your spouse, marking them as protected territory. The final ritual was the lighting of the special candle. This was not a rushlight for practical use. This was a beeswax candle, saved for the entire year, blessed by the priest at Candlemas. It was pure, clean burning, and holy. You would light it and let it burn for just a few minutes, its steady, bright flame, a direct contrast to the sputtering rushlights. This was not for seeing, this was for sanctifying. Its light was believed to push back not just darkness, but the spiritual evil that thrived within it. Watching it burn, you felt a fleeting sense of peace, a belief that a higher power was witnessing your struggle and lending its strength to your fragile defenses. When you extinguished it, you did so carefully, preserving the wick, believing that a bit of its protective power remained in the cooled wax, a sleeping guardian until the next night's battle. These rituals were not performed with the certainty of science. They were performed with the desperate hope of the besieged. You didn't necessarily believe they worked every time, but you absolutely believed that not doing them was an invitation for disaster. In a world where cause and effect were mysterious, where a child could sicken from a night breeze and a cow could die from a sudden fright, these actions were your only leverage. They were the tiny human order you could impose on the cosmic chaos of the night. They didn't vanquish the fear, but they made it bearable. They gave you something to do, a role to play in your own salvation. In the face of the overwhelming silent void, you would whisper and sprinkle and touch iron, and in doing so, you reminded yourself that you were not yet defeated. From the fragile comfort of protective rituals, we come to an unsettling truth. You weren't alone in your fear. The darkness that preyed on your mind also worked on the creatures sharing your space. The livestock you brought inside for warmth and safety, the cow, the goat, the chickens, weren't just passive sources of heat. They were nervous, skittish barometers of the night's mood. And their anxiety became a contagious disease that spread through the dark hut, confirming your worst suspicions without saying a word. You notice it first in the chickens. By day, they're stupid, bustling things, pecking at nothing. But in the dark, perched in their baskets or on the rafters, they become different creatures. They don't sleep soundly. They stir and cluck softly, a low, questioning sound. Then, without warning, one will startle, wings flapping violently against the wicker of its basket. The sound is explosive in the silence, making everyone, human and animal alike, jump. What did it hear? What did it sense that you didn't? Chickens are cowardly things. Their fear is a raw, unfiltered response to the world. When they panic in the dead of night, you know it's not their imagination. Something is there. Then there's the cow. She's a massive, warm presence in the corner, a living furnace you're grateful for. But her size, which is comforting by day, becomes unnerving at night. You can hear her chewing her cud, a steady, rhythmic sound that should be soothing. But when that rhythm breaks, when she suddenly stops chewing, when her ear flicks against the wall with a sharp thwack, when she lets out a low, worried moo, your blood runs cold. A cow doesn't startle at nothing. She is 1,000 pounds of solid muscle and instinct. If she is worried, there is something to be worried about. You find yourself listening to her more than to the wind, more than to the watchman. Her senses are sharper, her connection to the world more primal. She is your early warning system, and when she signals alarm, the fear in the room becomes a physical, thick presence. The goat is the worst. Goats are notoriously perceptive and stubborn. In the dark, your goat might stand perfectly still for hours, then suddenly stamp its foot and let out a sharp, human-like bleat that cuts through the silence like a knife. Goats were said to be able to see things people couldn't, to sense spirits and malevolent forces. When your goat stares fixedly at a dark corner, its strange rectangular pupils wide, you find yourself staring too, trying to see what it sees, your mind filling in the blanks with every horror you've ever imagined. The goat doesn't just share your fear, it directs it, pointing your attention toward the unseen threats lurking in the shadows you can't penetrate. This shared anxiety creates a feedback loop of dread. Your own nervous stirring makes the chickens cluck. The chickens clucking makes the cow shift her weight uneasily. The cow's movement makes the goat stamp and bleat. The goat's noise makes you jump, which startles the chickens again. It's a vicious cycle, a symphony of panic played on animal instincts and human fear. There are no words, only sounds and reactions. A conversation of terror between species that amplifies the menace of the night tenfold. The animals aren't just afraid, they are bearing witness, and their testimony is unequivocal. The dark is dangerous, and you can't explain it to them. You can't tell the cow that the sound she heard was just a falling branch. You can't reassure the goat that the shape in the corner is just a hanging cloak. They operate on a level of pure instinct, and their instinct is screaming at them that they are not safe. So you lie there, trapped between your own rationalizing mind and their undeniable animal certainty that something is wrong. In the end, you trust their judgment over your own. Their fear validates yours, making it more real, more justified. The darkness was terrifying when it was just you against it. But when the very animals you rely on for survival are trembling in their skins, it becomes an incontrovertible truth. The night is not empty. It is full of things to be feared, and every living creature in your fragile, darkened hut knows it. From the shared, animal-anxious vigil of the night comes the first, almost imperceptible change. It doesn't happen suddenly. There is no switch being flipped. The absolute black that has pressed against your eyes for what felt like an eternity begins, molecule by molecule, to dilute. This is the slow return of grey, the most beautiful and exhausting colour in the medieval world. It's not yet morning, not yet safety, but it's the first undeniable proof that the night siege is finally, gradually, losing its grip. The change begins at the edges of your perception. The blackness in the room softens from pitch to charcoal. You can't see objects yet, but you can sense the space between them. The solid wall of darkness that was the far wall of your hut becomes a dark grey sheet. Then faintly, you can make out the rough shape of the door, the lumpy forms of your still sleeping family. Your eyes, strained and dry from staring blindly for hours, begin to relax their frantic searching. The grey is flat, featureless, but it is light. It is information. It is the world returning to you. With the grey comes sound, or rather, the change in sound. The night's symphony of fear begins its final movement. The owls fall silent. The wolves cease their howling. The wind, which sounded so menacing and intentional all night, now just sounds like wind, a natural force, not a carrier of voices. The scuttling in the roof doesn't stop, but it loses its sinister edge. It's just mice again, not demons. The animals in the room settle. The cow lets out a deep, relaxed sigh. The chickens remain quiet. The world is shifting from a realm of mystery and threat back to a place of mundane, knowable reality. This is when the exhaustion hits you, a physical weight that settles into your bones. The tension that has kept you rigid and alert for hours suddenly releases, leaving you feeling hollowed out, bruised on the inside. Every muscle aches. Your head throbs from lack of sleep and the constant low-grade terror. You feel decades older than you did the evening before. but it's a good ache, a grateful exhaustion. You have survived another night. The simple fact of your continued existence feels like a monumental achievement. You lie there, watching the grey lighten, and you don't move. You don't want to break the spell. You just want to bathe in the growing light, to let it wash over you and cleanse the residual dread from your mind. As the grey turns to a pale silver light, details emerge. You can see the dust motes dancing in the air near the shuttered window. You can see the individual strands of straw in your mattress. You can see the faces of your children, peaceful in sleep, their night terrors forgotten. The room, which was a cavern of unknown horrors just an hour ago, is just a room again. A poor, dirty, cramped room, but a knowable space. The hanging cloak is a cloak. The bucket is a bucket. The world has been returned to you, stripped of its monstrous disguises, but the night leaves its mark. As you finally rise, your body stiff and protesting, you carry the memory of the darkness with you. The relief is profound, but it's tempered by the knowledge that it's only a reprieve. The sun will journey across the sky, and it will abandon you again. The fear doesn't vanish with the dawn. It merely retreats, going underground to gather its strength for the next assault. The slow return of grey is a salvation, but it's a temporary one. It brings the gift of sight and the return of the known world, but it also brings the grim certainty that the battle is never truly over. It's just a ceasefire, and the terms are always dictated by the sun. You have survived, but you are a veteran of a war that will resume at dusk, and the memory of the darkness is a scar that every dawn must heal anew. From the weary relief of dawn and the gradual return of the known world, we arrive at our final destination, your world. A world where darkness is optional, where night has been tamed, domesticated, pushed back by the simple flick of a switch. The medieval peasant's greatest terror, the absolute consuming dark, has been engineered into oblivion. But in our victory over the night, we may have lost something fundamental, an understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a world we could not fully control. Think of it now. When dusk falls, you don't experience the violent, sudden extinguishing of the world. Streetlights bloom to life, painting the streets in orange sodium hues. Houses glow from within, each window a square of artificial sun. Your own home is a constellation of tiny lights, the standby power indicator on the television, the digital clock on the microwave, the charger cable with its tiny LED. Darkness is no longer absolute. It's a gradient, a suggestion. You can banish it from any corner of any room with the twitch of a finger. The night has been declawed. This is a miracle. It really is. The fear that defined existence for 99% of human history has been largely erased. The child who would have lain trembling at every rustle in the thatch now sleeps safely under a nightlight. The parent who would have listened in terror to a sick child's ragged breathing can now see their face clearly, can take their temperature, can drive them to a hospital along brightly lit roads. The thief who would have operated under perfect cover is now captured on camera, illuminated by motion sensor lights. We have won the war against the dark, and we should never forget what a profound achievement that is. But in this victory, we've also lost the intimate, terrible relationship with the natural world that the dark enforced. The medieval peasant knew the night as a physical, spiritual, and psychological force. They knew its sounds, its moods, its dangers. They understood their own smallness in the face of it. Their fear was a form of respect for nature, for the unknown, for the boundaries of human knowledge and control. That constant, low-grade awareness of vulnerability forged a different kind of consciousness, one that was deeply attuned to the environment and to the fragile threads of community and ritual that held the darkness at bay. We, on the other hand, have become eternal day-dwellers. We've severed the connection between the setting sun and the end of activity. We can work, play and socialize deep into the night, ignoring the ancient rhythm that governed human life for millennia. The darkness no longer forces us into introspection, into silence, into the company of our own thoughts and the people immediately around us. We've traded the symphony of fear for the constant hum of distraction, and in doing so, we may have lost touch with a part of ourselves that only the quiet, profound dark could reveal. So the next time you find yourself in a truly dark place, perhaps camping far from city lights or during a power outage on a moonless night, pay attention to the feeling that arises. That primal prickle on the back of your neck, the slight quickening of your heartbeat, the way your hearing sharpens and your mind begins to populate the shadows. That is an echo, a genetic memory of the medieval night. It's the ghost of a fear that once ruled the world, a fear that shaped our stories, our rituals, our very understanding of safety and danger. The medieval peasant feared the dark because it was the ultimate teacher of vulnerability. It taught them that they were small in a vast, mysterious cosmos. It taught them to huddle together for warmth and protection. It taught them the value of fire, of community, of faith and of the dawn. We have conquered the darkness, but perhaps we should occasionally remember the lessons it taught. So tonight, when you're surrounded by all the lights of our modern world, take a moment, turn them off. Sit in the quiet dark for just a minute and listen. Listen for the echo of a time when the night was longer, darker, and alive with terrors and wonders we can now only imagine, and be grateful that for you it is only a choice.